Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. In the dark vastness of the Warhammer galaxy, every civilization is marked by the scars of ancient calamity and the ever-present shadow of chaos. Yet among these, the Tau remain an anomaly, an empire of progress and unity, untouched by the Eye of Terror, the most blighted region in the cosmos. Long before they mapped their stars or knew the Eye by name, the Tau's destiny led them to skirt its corrupting borders, never feeling the pull that so many others could not resist. The story of why the Tau were spared the Eye's curse, before they even realized what horrors lurked there, is as much about cosmic fate as it is about the character of the Tau themselves, and it is a mystery as deep as the void itself. The early days of the Tau are draped in a quiet seclusion, almost as if the galaxy itself conspired to protect them. When the Imperium first glimpsed their world, the Tau were a primitive people, living in harmony with their sun-bleached plains and rolling steppes, distant from the churning galactic heart where countless empires rose and fell. Their home system was nestled at the galaxy's far edge, so removed that the tides of great wars and galactic plagues barely whispered across their night sky. It was as if the darkness itself respected an invisible border around them. The void beyond their world was silent, their ancestors gazing up at unfamiliar constellations and dreaming of nothing beyond the next sunrise. Unlike so many other fledgling races, the Tau never inherited ancestral tales of warp horrors or starborn demons. Their oral histories were filled with the struggles of tribe against tribe, the harsh lessons of survival, and the slow triumph of unity. There were no cautionary legends warning of cursed voids or malign influences drifting on the solar winds. This absence was not mere ignorance, it was insulation, a kind of cosmic mercy bestowed upon them, or perhaps a sign of their accidental irrelevance to the games of ancient gods. Physical isolation shaped not just their destiny, but their entire worldview. Their planets lay behind curtains of treacherous warp storms, anomalies that churned between them and the rest of the galaxy for countless millennia. These barriers were more than just cosmic weather. They were the scars of past conflicts, echoes of events so ancient that even the Tau's nascent spirit never sensed them. Ships could not reach them, signals could not warn them, and the nightmares that stalked the stars seemed always to veer away from the Tau's domain. As a result, the Tau's nascent civilization grew organically, unpressured by outside threats, and developed along lines utterly different from those of races locked in perpetual struggle with the unnatural. For the Tau, there was no mythic enemy lurking in the heavens, no monstrous other to bind their people together through shared fear. The closest thing to darkness in their ancient psyche was the shadow of a rival tribe, or the uncertainty of drought. It is hard to imagine a fate more foreign to the rest of the galaxy's cursed children. There is a certain tragedy and beauty in this innocence. The Tau, in their natural seclusion, became a people defined by hope and ingenuity. While other species learned to fear the dark, to whisper prayers against what waited in the warp, the Tau filled their stories with lessons of progress and cooperation. They dreamed of soaring higher, of building something lasting and beautiful together, never guessing that other races saw only survival as the highest aspiration. And so, when the wider galaxy finally came crashing in, it was not with whispers of caution, but with the shock of thunder. By then, the Eye of Terror had been raging for 10,000 years, but the Tau had never once heard its name. To this day, their early isolation remains one of the most haunting what-ifs of Warhammer lore. Was this shielding simply luck, or was it the result of forces moving unseen? In a universe where even the smallest act can be the ripple of a god's will, the Tau's seclusion feels almost deliberate, as if some silent hand spared them from the trauma that shapes so much of the galaxy. Whatever the reason, their homeworlds grew up quiet, bright, and curiously untouched by the screaming madness that echoes eternally from the Eye. Long before the Tau had the means to navigate the stars, the galaxy had already drawn its own boundaries. The space between the Tau and the core-ward horrors was not empty. It was a tangled morass of warp storms, gravitational anomalies, and rifts that twisted the fabric of reality itself. Ancient star charts, if the Tau had ever possessed them, would have shown a wall of instability, barring their way to the galactic northwest, a ceaseless tempest of psychic and stellar phenomena that made even the most basic navigation a deadly impossibility. For countless millennia, these natural barricades stood as mute sentinels, denying the Tau any inkling of what waited on the other side. The galaxy's history is written in these scars. The Eye of Terror was born 10,000 years ago, its birth cry tearing a wound across the Materium and Immaterium alike. But even before that pockal event, the region that would become the Eye was already a place of ill omen, scarred by the ancient war between the Old Ones and their creations, and the madness of the birth of the Eldar gods. Cataclysms on a scale the Tau cannot imagine left behind echoing storms in both real space and the warp, regions where the stars themselves burned with sickly light or vanished entirely. When the Great Rift eventually sundered the galaxy, these old wounds only widened, but for the Tau, such events were distant myths, if they were even whispered at all. As the Tau began their first tentative steps into the void, their explorers and astronomers charted the heavens with rational minds, seeking order and pattern in the stars. What they found were blank patches and swirling mysteries, stretches of space where their most advanced sensors failed and their ships dared not go. The nearest Imperial world seemed distant enough, separated by fields of chaos and shadow. There was no clear path, no inviting corridor leading into the ancient heartlands of war. It was as if the galaxy itself was trying to protect them, or perhaps warn them away from something they could not hope to understand. This separation was compounded by the peculiarities of the Tau approach to science. Lacking the psychic sensitivity that would allow them to feel the wrongness of certain places, their understanding of these barriers was strictly material. Dangerous radiation, anomalous gravity, bizarre sensor readings. They cataloged these as hazards, not portents. Entire sectors were quietly marked as off-limits, unsuitable for colonization or trade, their mysteries dismissed as unproductive to pursue. For the Tau, every expansion must be measured, every risk calculated. Without any context for true warp horror, these inscrutable zones were simply written off as the quirks of an imperfect universe. The Eye of Terror, a howling maelstrom of unreality to human and Eldar minds, was to the Tau nothing more than an unnavigable blank on the map. The real irony is that these ancient barriers, by locking the Tau away from the wider galaxy, may have saved them from the doom that befell so many others. While countless Imperial and Xenos fleets shattered themselves against the edges of the Eye, while entire civilizations were devoured or twisted beyond recognition, the Tau lived and grew in their bubble of relative peace. Even the occasional warp storm that brushed their periphery seemed muted compared to the nightmares just beyond their reach. Their star charts became an unconscious testament to their good fortune. Blankness where death dwelled, silence where madness raged. To look at a Tau map is to see a galaxy not of war and chaos, but of possibility. The haunted corridors of the Eye and its environs are simply not there. A deliberate gap, a blind spot shaped by both cosmic violence and the quiet hope of a young species. Whether these ancient barriers were merely chance, the echo of a cosmic tragedy, or the lingering defense of a long-dead civilization, they served to shelter the Tau from a fate darker than any their young minds could comprehend. Their avoidance of the Eye was not just a matter of distance or ignorance, but of boundaries set by the very structure of the stars. A subtle, invisible force that changed the course of a people's history. For the Tau, the warp was never a living nightmare or a haunted corridor between worlds. Instead, it was simply a mystery, a mathematical abstraction their scientists couldn't fully comprehend. While humanity and the Eldar lived every day with the burden of the Immaterium, its whispers, its hunger, its ever-present threat, the Tau remained untouched, blissfully ignorant of its storms and siren calls. This was not a matter of arrogance or hubris, but a result of their most fundamental nature, a complete lack of psychic sensitivity. Among the Tau, not a single true psyker had ever been born, and the rare, subtle deviations that did occur never rose to the level of conscious power. To them, the warp was silent. Its monsters could not claw at their dreams, and its voices could not call them to ruin. This blindness did not merely shield them from obvious horrors. It also shaped every aspect of their society. The Tau developed no cults of prophecy or demonology, no superstitions built from the fragments of warp-wrought tragedy. Their philosophers puzzled over the faint anomalies in the void, trying to explain them with equations and sensor data, never suspecting that there was a whole other reality just out of reach, one that their scientists would never be able to see. Even the Ethereals, the mysterious caste that united the Tau people, showed no sign of psychic talent, as the Imperium would define it. If any of them sensed the shifting tides of the warp, they did not share it, and their gifts, if they exist, remain shrouded in ritual and secrecy. It is in this psychic absence that the Tau's fate was perhaps most decisively sealed. Other races learned to fear places where the warp was strong, to turn away from regions that reeked of corruption, or to mark voids where reality wore thin. To the Tau, these were simply unexplained hazards. Sensor blackouts, gravitational peculiarities, or failures of their elegant FTL drives. They cataloged the eye's periphery as a navigational dead zone, never realizing that the very fabric of the galaxy had been torn open, allowing demonic things to spill forth. The stories that humans and Eldar whispered in terror, of ships lost to madness, of planets consumed by unreality, were entirely absent from Tau lore. This blindness was a kind of innocence, but also a double-edged sword. The Tau could never be corrupted by warp entities in the same way as humans or Eldar, but they also had no context for what those entities were, or what they could do. The Eye of Terror, with its promise of forbidden power and ultimate damnation, held no appeal to a race that could not even see its true face. If a Tau ship had stumbled too close, its crew would have noticed only mechanical failures, spatial distortions, perhaps strange patterns in their instruments, never the psychic dread that would drive an Imperial navigator mad. In this way, the Eye became not a warning, but a blank page. One more unexplored oddity in a galaxy full of mysteries. Some fans speculate that this warp blindness is the very reason the Tau exist at all. A kind of cosmic loophole left by the universe to remind itself of a simpler, cleaner time. Others argue that it is only a matter of time before their ignorance becomes their undoing, as the galaxy grows darker and the walls between realities grow thin. Yet there is an undeniable beauty in this absence. The Tau stand apart, spared not by might or cunning, but by the simple, staggering fact that the gods of the warp cannot touch what they cannot see. As long as the Tau remain blind to the Imperium's hunger, the Eye of Terror will always be invisible, a phantom wound in the galaxy that their minds will never know, and their souls will never fear. While the Tau's physical and psychic separation from the Eye of Terror was profound, there was another layer to their ignorance. The vast, suffocating silence imposed by the Imperium of man. The galaxy's greatest empire, for all its brutality and dogma, has always maintained a strange relationship with knowledge. To the Imperium, information is both a weapon and a curse. Something to be wielded sparingly, hidden when dangerous, or even purged when inconvenient. In the case of the Eye of Terror, this secrecy takes on a near-religious fervor. The region is not merely marked on maps, it is shrouded in taboo, surrounded by the fear and misinformation of billions who know only that to stray near it is to court damnation. This culture of fear and suppression stretches far beyond the Eye's warping borders. For the Tau, encountering the Imperium was less a meeting of minds than a collision with a wall of noise and obfuscation. The Imperium's refusal to share star charts or accurate warnings was not an act of malice toward the Tau specifically, but a natural extension of its own survival reflex. The very existence of the Eye is whispered only among the highest echelons of the Adeptus Terra and the Inquisition. To the lower ranks, to civilians, and certainly to alien interlopers, it is at best a blotted void on the map, at worst, a myth. Even the Mechanicus, obsessed as they are with the cataloging and hoarding of ancient knowledge, treat the region with superstitious dread, unwilling to transmit anything that might draw the Eye's attention or risk their own souls. This Imperium-wide censorship created a galaxy pockmarked with informational dead zones. Records of the Eye and its terrors are expunged, navigational warnings are wrapped in opaque code, and travelers who stumble too close are often rescued, only to vanish into the black cells of the Inquisition. Even in the rare event that Tau explorers attempted communication with Imperial authorities, they were met with deliberate obfuscation, misdirection, or outright hostility. To outsiders like the Tihao, the silence surrounding the eye seemed not ominous, but simply another quirk of a paranoid, hostile neighbor. Layered over this official silence is the Imperium's own psychic presence, a constant, chaotic roar in the warp that drowns out subtler signals and drowns entire sectors in psychic static. Even if the Tau had possessed the means to sense the warp, the sheer noise generated by Imperial astropaths, navigators, and the worship of the Emperor would have made fine details impossible to discern. The few human traders and outcasts who did reach Tau space carried only fragmentary, often contradictory stories of the wider galaxy. The Eye of Terror itself became just another piece of apocalyptic folklore, stripped of its context and warning. It is easy to imagine the Tau, with their rational minds and scientific optimism, regarding the rumors as nothing more than human superstition, another reason to dismiss certain sectors as unreliable. By the time any concrete hints of the Eye's existence reached Tau strategists, they were so diluted by Imperial misdirection and propaganda that they could not be separated from the hundreds of other mysteries that fill the galaxy's black corners. Thus, the Tihao's unknowing avoidance of the Eye was not just a product of their own nature, but of the Imperium's calculated effort to suppress and distort knowledge. An empire so determined to guard its secrets that even its enemies are protected from certain truths, whether they want to be or not. The galaxy is old beyond comprehension, and the Tau are not its only children. Across the stars, countless Xenos races have risen, flourished, and fallen, each leaving behind fragments of wisdom, warning, or despair. Though the Tau began in isolation, the first steps of their expansion brought them into contact with these remnants. Dying empires, drifting ships, or the spectral ruins of worlds long since scoured by war. While official Tau records do not dwell on the superstitions of other races, there is a quiet truth that the void is thick with warnings, sometimes spoken in cryptic transmissions, sometimes left unspoken in the haunted silence of abandoned sectors. Among the earliest alien contacts, the Tau encountered the Kroot, mercenaries and wanderers who had traversed the galaxy for millennia. The Kroot are not a race of historians, but their shamans are sensitive to the strange tides of fate, and their oral traditions hint at voids best left unexplored. Tau explorers, pragmatic to a fault, listen to these stories as curiosities, never quite understanding their gravity. To the Kroot, the Eye of Terror might be described only as a region where the stars go hungry, or the winds carry only screams, metaphors incomprehensible to Tau rationality. Yet, even so, the Kroot and other Xenos mercenaries consistently discouraged Tau expeditions from venturing into the blighted northwest of the galaxy, urging their employers to expand along safer, less haunted frontiers. Further afield, ancient Eldar ruins occasionally bore symbols or runes that Tau archaeologists struggled to decipher. Among the few who studied these silent warnings, there emerged a pattern. Certain directions, certain regions of space were marked with runes of death or sorrow, untranslatable but unmistakably ominous. The Eldar, whose history is intimately entwined with the birth of the Eye, left behind a latticework of warnings. Monoliths pointing away from the galactic wound, relics that radiate subtle psychic unease even to those unable to sense the warp. While the Tau never grasped the full significance, the effect was real. Even the most ambitious watercast negotiators found their expeditions stalling when faced with repeated failures, vanished probes, or an unaccountable sense of unease among Xenos' allies. Over time, a vague consensus emerged. There were places in the galaxy where luck always ran thin, where machinery failed, where hired guides grew nervous and superstitious. The Tau, guided as much by results as by theory, quietly marked these regions as high risk and shifted their expansion elsewhere. The process was almost subconscious, a slow accumulation of caution reinforced by alien rumor and unexplained loss. In a universe where direct communication about the warp was all but impossible, the collective wisdom of 1,000 defeated civilizations spoke not through words, but through absence, through the paths not taken and the missions never returned. There are stories, still whispered on the fringes of the Tau Empire, of merchant fleets that strayed too far, of exploratory cadres that vanished without trace. These tales never reference the Eye of Terror by name. How could they? Instead, They form a low background hum of dread, an ambient warning picked up from every species the Tau encountered. In their own way, these unspoken warnings were every bit as powerful as Imperial censorship or warp storms. The galaxy itself seemed to nudge the Tau away from the eye, using the voices of those who had already paid the price for curiosity. It is a grim testament to the galaxy's shared trauma that even a race as rational and hopeful as the Tau could not remain entirely untouched by the sorrow of others. Among the many mysteries that define the Tau, none is greater than the rise of the Ethereals. This enigmatic caste appeared suddenly in Tau history, seemingly ending centuries of civil war overnight and uniting the tribes under the greater good. To many outsiders, this peaceful revolution is as suspicious as it is inspiring, especially in a galaxy where manipulation, both mundane and supernatural, is the norm. The Ethereals command absolute loyalty, yet their methods are subtle. They rarely rule with open force, instead shaping culture, law, and even the emotional climate of their people through a web of ritual and tradition. If any group within the Tau could possess hidden knowledge of the galaxy's darkest places, it would be the Ethereals. There are those among the Tau who wonder, quietly, and only in the safety of the most trusted circles, if the Ethereals possess a map of the universe that is more complete than any shared with the rest of society. The timing of their arrival, the rapid development of a caste-based order, and their uncanny ability to unify the Tau in the face of every threat. These things hint at secrets buried beneath centuries of myth-making. The Ethereals encourage the exploration of the stars, but always within strict boundaries. Paths of expansion are chosen with deliberate caution, and unexplained hazards are never dismissed as mere misfortune. Reports of vanished probes or failed expeditions are met with somber reflection and quiet adjustments to Tau's stellar policy, never public panic. What if, somewhere in their hidden councils, the Ethereals maintain forbidden lore about the Eye of Terror and other galactic horrors? Perhaps they inherited a fragment of ancient knowledge from the Xeno civilizations they absorbed, or perhaps their own mysterious senses warned them away from certain regions. There is a compelling fan theory that the Ethereals were engineered, directly or indirectly, by forces with a vested interest in keeping the Tau free from warped taint. Whether these forces are the last vestiges of the old ones, a forgotten Tan, or even some rogue psychic entity from the deep past. In this interpretation, the Ethereals are not just wise leaders, but living safeguards, programmed to guide their people away from existential threats they could never hope to understand. Of course, the truth may be more mundane. The Ethereals could simply be deeply pragmatic, recognizing through trial and error that certain regions of space are too dangerous to explore. Their leadership style, rooted in secrecy, consensus, and an aversion to risk, means that collective memory is easily shaped, uncomfortable questions are gently redirected, and patterns of caution become cultural instinct. Over generations, this attitude calcified into policy. If a region resists all attempts at peaceful contact, if it swallows probes and fleets, it is to be avoided. The Ethereals need not explain themselves to the lower castes, nor do they need to reveal the true scale of cosmic danger. What is most striking about the Ethereals is how their presence transforms Tau psychology. While the other castes are driven by curiosity, ambition, and scientific fervor, the Ethereals represent the collective conscience, the voice that says some doors are not meant to be opened, some regions not meant to be traversed. Whether this comes from secret wisdom or simply the burden of leadership, the result is the same. The Tau expansion has always skirted the Eye of Terror, not out of fear, but out of faith in the unseen guidance of their mysterious leaders. The galaxy is full of horrors waiting to consume the unwary. The Tau, thanks to their Ethereals, may be the only race who has learned to turn away before the price of knowledge becomes too high. Some shadows linger, even where no one knows their source. For the Tau, a people raised on reason and harmony, it would seem unthinkable that their society could harbor a nameless fear. Yet there are hints, subtle and persistent, that something unspoken has shaped their collective psyche. It's not the paralyzing dread that haunts humanity or the soul-deep sorrow of the Eldar, but a quieter anxiety, a sense that some corners of the void are best left unexplored. Even before their first contact with the wider galaxy, Tau folklore was curiously silent on the subject of what might lie beyond the edge of their home stars. Their oldest tales warn of hubris, of straying too far from the wisdom of the community, but rarely of monsters or darkness. Still, there is a recurring theme: the outsider, the outcast, the tribe that vanishes into the night and is never seen again. Perhaps this is coincidence, a product of the Tau's early struggles, their long years on a harsh world that rewarded unity and punished recklessness. Yet there are moments, even now, when a Tau scientist or explorer staring into the blank sectors of a star chart feels a chill of foreboding that logic cannot dispel. When expeditions disappear, their fate unknown, it is not fear of daemons or the warp that troubles the Tau, but a lingering sense that the universe itself has limits and that trespassing beyond them is not just dangerous, but somehow forbidden. This unease does not manifest in open terror or religious hysteria, but in the slow, quiet shaping of custom and policy. Always chart a course around the emptiest regions, always weigh the cost of the unknown. Over time, these cultural echoes become self-fulfilling. Young Tau are taught to value caution, to listen for patterns in failure, and to trust that unexplained hazards are best left alone. There are no stories of chaos gods or the madness of the eye, but there is a deep-rooted wisdom that there are places where nothing returns. This wisdom, passed from teacher to student, leader to follower, carries a weight all its own. It is a fear without a face, a collective intuition that, while never spoken aloud, acts as a silent guardian against the galaxy's greatest evils. It's tempting to wonder if this subconscious aversion is simply the sum of lost explorers and failed probes, or if something older and stranger works through the Tihau. In the Warhammer universe, even the faintest psychic ripples can shape destiny across centuries. Perhaps the collective horror of the Eye, screamed into the warp by uncounted billions over the millennia, is felt on some level even by those unable to name or sense it directly. The Tau, unable to see the warp, might still feel its aftershocks as a dull pressure, an aversion, an inexplicable refusal to approach certain regions of space. Community theorists and fan writers love to imagine that the Tau's mythology contains these buried warnings, a shadow of chaos that manifests not as a boogeyman but as a quiet taboo. Unlike other races, the Tau don't ritualize or dramatize their fears. Instead, they institutionalize them, wrapping their dread in procedures and protocols. The avoidance of the Eye of Terror is not written in any ancient text, nor is it enforced by religious decree. It is something subtler, a chill that runs through their history, an inherited caution that guides their steps. And in the end, this subconscious fear, woven deep into the Tau's cultural DNA, may have done more to save them from the Eye than any map or warning ever could. From the earliest days of their journey to the stars, the Tau were never reckless voyagers. Their approach to expansion was marked by careful calculation, a scientific optimism tempered by an almost instinctive caution. Each new system was chosen with rigorous deliberation. Planets were surveyed, resources assessed, and risks measured against the promise of progress. This doctrine of measured growth, so different from the desperate scrabbling of the Imperium or the predatory hunger of the Tyranids, meant that the Tau rarely found themselves in truly existential peril. Expansion was never about blind conquest. It was about harmony, sustainability, and above all, avoiding avoidable dangers. In this light, the Tau's evasion of the Eye of Terror seems less like chance and more like the inevitable outcome of their worldview. Their explorers, equipped with advanced sensors and a mandate to avoid unnecessary losses, cataloged the galaxy in terms of probabilities and resource curves. When faced with the anomalous blankness of the Eye's periphery, regions where navigation failed, signals vanished, and survey drones simply did not return, they responded not with religious terror, but with practical wisdom. No glory was to be found in the unknown. Every effort was spent on building strength where success was likely, not where legend or rumor beckoned. Over time, this policy crystallized into an almost invisible barrier, a line of non-interference drawn not from fear, but from the cold calculus of cost and benefit. Tau culture reinforces this pragmatism at every level. The greater good is not served by wasteful heroics or reckless gambles. Every life, every ship, every investment of resources is meant to further the health and harmony of the Empire. The stories of lost expeditions do not become epic tragedies or tales of martyrdom. They become warnings, quietly filed away as examples of poor judgment. In meetings of the Earth Caste and the Water Caste, decisions about expansion are debated in terms of logistics and statistics, not myth or destiny. This creates a kind of built-in resistance to the siren call of the unknown. Where human or Eldar explorers might push forward out of pride or desperation, the Tau simply reroute, shifting their ambitions to more fertile and less dangerous frontiers. The avoidance of the Eye of Terror is, in this sense, a triumph of the Tau way of life. Their optimism is never naive, but rooted in a deep faith in the power of reasoned progress. Every time a mission returns with warnings of unexplainable anomalies or lost contact, the lesson is internalized. There is no shame in turning back from the brink. The Tau do not crave the glory of discovering cosmic horrors. They crave stability, growth, and a future for their people. This rational idealism, so often seen as a weakness by other races, is perhaps their greatest strength. It means that when they chart the stars, they chart them with care. And when the galaxy whispers of doom from a distant wound in reality, the Tau simply choose another path. To outsiders, this may look like cowardice or even ignorance. But to the Tau, it is wisdom, an unwavering commitment to the greater good that values life over legend, progress over peril. It is a cultural shield that has so far kept them from the Eye's corrupting influence. The universe is full of temptations and traps, but for the Tau, the only destiny worth pursuing is one built step by cautious step, far from the abyss. Not every Tau venture into the stars ended in triumph. In the silent archives of the Earth Caste, and in the somber recollections of Water Caste diplomats, there exist records of ships and fleets that vanished without explanation. These are not the grand tragedies that define human or Eldar history, but quiet mysteries, entries marked only by silence, unexplained gaps in otherwise meticulous logs. Some were merchant convoys sent to chart new trade routes, others were exploratory cadres tasked with surveying promising resource-rich systems. A handful were even ambitious colonization efforts meant to plant the seeds of the greater good on distant, unclaimed worlds. Most never returned, and the void left by their absence grew into a subtle caution that would shape Tau policy for generations. What happened to these lost expeditions remains unknown, even to the most dogged Tau investigators. Communications would fail without warning, navigational data would become corrupted, and rescue missions sent after the missing ships would often suffer the same fate. Sometimes debris was found, twisted metal fragments adrift at the edge of uncharted space, scorched hulls bearing no signs of battle, black boxes with only static and garbled telemetry. No one could say for certain what force had claimed them. For a society so grounded in rationality and progress, the inability to explain these losses was a source of unease that gnawed at the Tau's sense of control. Yet, unlike humanity, the Tau did not turn to superstition. Instead, they refined their procedures and protocols, updating the maps with new caution zones, slowly retreating from the sectors that seemed to consume their ships. Rumors grew among the more adventurous elements of Tau society, stories told in quiet moments by pilots and traders who claimed to have glimpsed things best left unspoken. Ghostly lights flickering on the edge of sensor range, strange gravitic fluctuations that no model could predict, and whispers on the comms that sounded almost like words. Some described a sense of vertigo, an irrational certainty that something ancient and inimical watched them from the dark. Water Caste negotiators returning from missions near these voids spoke of alien guides who grew nervous and evasive, refusing to set course anywhere near the haunted sectors. Even Kroot mercenaries, usually fearless, even gleeful in the face of danger, grew solemn, refusing contracts to scout certain stars. These losses never crystallized into a single legend or warning, but instead seeped into the Tau's collective consciousness. The response was never hysteria or religious panic, but an increasingly sophisticated risk assessment. Do not send ships where ships do not return. Earth Caste engineers quietly developed more robust failsafes, while Air Caste captains planned their routes to avoid the growing list of unexplained hazards. Over time, the areas bordering the Eye of Terror and other warp-unstable voids became invisible walls. Expansion flowed along safer vectors, the forbidden zones growing not by decree but by attrition, as each vanished expedition became another data point in a silent pattern of loss. For the Tau, these vanished missions became a lesson in humility. The galaxy, for all its promise, was not theirs for the taking. There were limits, silent, unseen boundaries where even the greatest technology could not guarantee survival. While the specifics of the Eye of Terror were still unknown, the aggregate weight of these mysteries made its influence felt all the same. The cost of curiosity, measured in lost lives and dreams, was simply too high to ignore. Thus, even before the Tau learned the true nature of the galactic wound, they had already internalized its lesson. There are places in the universe that will not be mapped, not by hope and not by reason alone. The galaxy changed forever with the coming of the Great Rift, a wound so violent that even the most insulated and warp-blind civilizations could not help but feel its echo. For the Tau, who had for so long navigated the stars by logic and trust in the tangible, the eruption of the Cicatrix Maledictum was like the breaking of a dam that had stood since the dawn of their history. Suddenly, the blank spots on their maps came alive with impossible readings. Gravitational tides fluctuated wildly. Whole stars seemed to vanish behind curtains of unreality. And even the most rational Tau scientists were forced to admit that something beyond the material had intruded upon their careful understanding of the cosmos. The first hints came in the form of lost communications, sectors that dropped into silence for weeks or months, and strange reports from border worlds. Vessels sent to investigate returned with stories so strange they defied easy explanation, auroras of unnatural light, voices on open channels speaking languages no Tau had ever learned, and survivors racked by unexplainable terror or raving with visions. The Tau, once so sure of their place in a rational universe, suddenly faced the terrifying possibility that their ignorance had been their only shield. The old caution zones were no longer safe, and the forbidden regions seemed to move and expand of their own accord. On Sasia, the most advanced Tau scholars pored over anomalous data, trying desperately to fit the new phenomena into known laws. Many refused to believe that the universe had changed. Some clung to the hope that these were just extreme versions of known hazards. But there were others, scientists, Ethereals, and field commanders alike, who recognized in these new mysteries the echo of every lost probe, every vanished expedition, every rumor whispered by Kroot or Watercast trader. The pieces fell into place with grim inevitability. The galaxy was broken, and the void they had always avoided was not an empty frontier, but a chasm filled with madness and death. The impact on the Tau psyche was profound. For a people raised to believe in progress and the ultimate power of reason, the shattering of their ignorance was not just a scientific crisis, but a cultural trauma. The greater good had always seemed like a promise of safety, an assurance that with enough wisdom and unity, any obstacle could be overcome. Now, that belief was tested as never before. In councils and research chambers, the Tau debated how to respond, not just strategically, but philosophically. Some called for the total abandonment of threatened worlds. Others urged a redoubling of efforts to pierce the mysteries of the warp with technology and new sciences. Still others, haunted by what they had seen, began to question whether the Tau had ever truly been protected, or whether they had simply been lucky for a time. The Great Rift's arrival did more than reveal the existence of the Eye of Terror. It forced the Tau to confront the truth that some knowledge carries a price. No longer could they pretend that the galaxy was simply a puzzle waiting to be solved. The horrors that lay just beyond their reach were real, and they were closer than anyone had imagined. The old taboos and boundaries were no longer enough. In their place, a new caution grew, not of ignorance, but of hard-won experience. For the first time, the Tau understood that there are wounds in reality that cannot be healed, only survived. And as they gazed into the abyss, they knew at last the scale of what they had been spared, and what it would cost to keep their people safe in a galaxy that had been changed forever. In the fan community, the question of why the Tau avoided the Eye of Terror long before they even knew of its existence has given rise to a rich tapestry of speculation, conjecture, and wild, wonderful theorycraft. To some, the Tao's fate is not just a series of happy accidents or rational decisions, but the mark of deeper cosmic manipulations, threads woven by hands unseen, perhaps stretching all the way back to the dawn of sentient life in the galaxy. What if the Tao's journey was not merely insulated by luck or by their own pragmatism, but guided, nudged, and protected by powers beyond their comprehension? One of the most enduring theories draws from the ancient rivalry of the Old Ones and the forces of chaos. In this narrative, the Old Ones, knowing the scale of the disaster they had unleashed in their wars against the Necrons and the Catan, seeded the galaxy with psychic blind spots, regions, and perhaps species that would be inherently insulated from the warp's corruption. Some fans point to the Tao's genetic isolation and total lack of psychic potential as a kind of ancient failsafe, a living legacy meant to preserve hope against the dark. Their location on the galactic fringe, boxed in by storms and voids, was no accident, but a deliberate act of preservation. In this view, the Tao are a living memory of the galaxy's lost innocence, spared from the eye not by chance, but by design. Others look to chaos itself as the architect of the Tao's avoidance. While it seems paradoxical, there is a seductive logic to the idea that the gods of the warp have, for their own unknowable reasons, chosen to leave the Tao untouched. Perhaps they sense no utility in corrupting a people so fundamentally disconnected from the warp. Or perhaps their presence in the galaxy is a kind of cosmic control group, a test, a temptation, or even a future prize to be claimed when the time is right. Some theorists go further, suggesting that the Tao's very ignorance is a form of warp manipulation, a psychic suppression field that both hides them from danger and ensures they remain naive, ripe for a catastrophic awakening at some future date. There are also theories that focus on the mysterious emergence of the Ethereals, suggesting that their sudden appearance and near-miraculous power to unify the Tao are not of purely natural origin. Perhaps the Ethereals are agents or constructs of the Old Ones, programmed with ancient knowledge to guide the Tao safely along the edges of galactic disaster. Others posit that the Ethereals are a psychic countermeasure, beings whose subtle influence acts as a firewall, keeping the Tao both united and oblivious to the wider truths of chaos and the eye. If this is true, then the Tao's avoidance is a product of deliberate, even benevolent, cosmic engineering. And then there are the truly cosmic perspectives, suggesting that fate itself, the warp, the universe, or even some sentient aspect of reality, has shaped the Tao's path to be one of learning, not suffering. In a galaxy where suffering and destruction are the rule, the Tao represent a potential for hope, for a way of life untouched by the long shadow of the eye. Their destiny, in this reading, is not to fall into the cycle of horror and rebirth, but to challenge it, to offer a different kind of answer to the problem of chaos. No matter which theory you favor, there is a certain poetic inevitability to the Tao's avoidance of the Eye of Terror. Whether by design, manipulation, or sheer luck, they are the galaxy's anomaly, an empire that, for a time, exists outside the eternal war between order and madness. It may be that in the end, the Tao's true test is yet to come, and that all the forces that kept them safe will one day withdraw, leaving them to face the Eye's horrors alone. Until then, they stand as a reminder that in the Warhammer universe, not even fate is ever truly blind. In the endless darkness of the 41st millennium, where hope is ground to dust and every star is a battleground, the Tao's strange relationship with the Eye of Terror stands out as both blessing and irony. Their journey, one of progress, unity, and cautious optimism, has kept them insulated from the deepest nightmares of the galaxy, but it has also marked them as perpetual outsiders. While humanity, the Eldar, and other ancient races stagger under the weight of warp-borne trauma, the Tao continue to move forward, guided by reason and an unbroken dream of the greater good. Their avoidance of the Eye is more than just a quirk of fate or cosmic geography. It is a testament to a way of being almost unthinkable in the age of darkness. This separation, though, is not without its cost. The Tao's innocence is both their armor and their greatest vulnerability. They are spared the psychic scars that define so much of galactic history, yet this very ignorance leaves them exposed, should the horrors of the Eye ever turn their gaze upon the Empire's shining worlds. For now, the Tao are a living contradiction, untouched by chaos, yet surrounded on all sides by its aftermath, thriving in a universe that seems determined to test every hope to its breaking point. The question remains whether this distance is sustainable, or whether the Tau, in time, will be forced to confront the darkness they have so long skirted, whether by cosmic accident, the schemes of gods, or their own relentless push for understanding. What makes the Tau's story truly compelling is its message about possibility. In a setting obsessed with damnation and endless war, the Tau show that there is another way, however precarious. Their journey is a fragile miracle, one that could shatter at any moment, but that for now serves as a light, however faint, against the gloom. It is the interplay of tragedy and hope, of reason and the unknown, that gives their narrative such power in the Warhammer mythos. Whether they are the galaxy's last, best hope, or simply its most fortunate fools, the Tau's existence is proof that even in the darkest future, there remains room for something new, something untried, something that refuses to bow to inevitability. If there is one word that defines the spirit of the Tau, one that sets them utterly apart from the battered souls of the wider galaxy, it is hope. This hope, naive in the eyes of other races, is more than a political tool or the empty platitude of a regime. It is the animating force that shapes every decision, every dream, and every moment of Tau history. The Tau are not blind to struggle. Their world was once divided and scarred by endless tribal war, and their unity was forged through suffering, not given as a gift. Yet, unlike the Imperium, whose faith is defined by the ceaseless endurance of pain, or the Eldar, whose every triumph is shadowed by an awareness of imminent loss, the Tau have always believed that the future can be made better by the choices of the present. The absence of the eye of terror from their lives is not merely the avoidance of horror. It is the space in which this hope is allowed to grow. For the Tau, there is no central myth of original sin, no cultural trauma that forces them to look at the stars with dread. They do not share the haunted dreams of human navigators, nor do they understand the soul-deep terror of the Eldar at the mere mention of Slaanesh. Their absence from the eye's shadow is, in a way, the only true innocence left in the galaxy. Yet this very innocence is deeply tragic, for it exists in a universe built to punish it. Every Tau expansion, every colony, and every innovation is a defiance of the grimdark reality surrounding them. The Tau do not ignore the galaxy's perils out of arrogance. Rather, they have learned, through bitter but measured experience, to turn away from what cannot be mastered. They look for patterns, for rules that can be studied, for problems that can be solved, not for omens or signs. The blank space on the star charts where the Eye of Terror festers is not merely an area of ignorance, but a sanctuary for hope, a place where dreams are not yet devoured by inevitability. In this, the Tau are the living answer to the galaxy's greatest question. Is it better to know and suffer, or not to know and strive? But hope, when untempered, is always in danger of becoming illusion. The Tau's rationality has protected them from countless dangers, yet it has also left them vulnerable to shocks that cannot be reasoned away. The eruption of the Great Rift and the dawning horror of the Eye's true nature threaten not just their borders, but their very sense of self. For the first time in their history, the Tau are forced to confront the possibility that some truths may be too terrible for even the greater good to absorb. Their scientists, once so confident in their power to map and model the cosmos, now face the existential crisis of seeing the world as it truly is: broken, unpredictable, and hostile to life. In this crucible of crisis, the Tau's optimism becomes a double-edged sword. On one hand, it grants them the resilience to adapt and to look for solutions even in the face of the unknown. On the other, it exposes them to wounds far deeper than those of the flesh. There are water-cast envoys who, upon learning the truth of the Eye, retreat from public life, haunted by visions they cannot share. There are ethereal councils that debate, in secret, whether the time has come to tell their people the full scale of the galaxy's horror, or whether to shield them for a while longer, preserving the dream for another generation. The very heart of the greater good is tested, not by the brutality of war, but by the darkness that cannot be explained away. And yet, even in this, there is a fierce beauty to the Tau's struggle. Their avoidance of the Eye of Terror is not merely a product of chance or of cunning, but the result of a culture that chose, again and again, to believe that the universe could be made better by collective action. They have become the mirror to the galaxy's endless despair. The Tau's greatest contribution is not their technology, nor even their brief moment of peace, but their refusal to surrender to cynicism. In the cold logic of the Warhammer universe, hope itself is an act of rebellion, a weapon every bit as mighty as the bolter or the lasgun. As the Tau step into a future where the Eye of Terror is no longer a myth but a looming presence, their innocence cannot last forever. But the memory of that innocence and the choices it inspired will continue to shape their response to the galaxy's horrors. Will they harden into another callous power, joining the Imperium in its grim acceptance of endless war? Or will they find a way to preserve, even in tragedy, the possibility that things can be changed? The answer is not yet written. All that is certain is that, in the moment before the Eye's shadow finally falls across the Empire, the Tau stand as the last true optimists in a universe designed to break all hope. Their story is not just one of survival, but of the fight to keep believing, even when the darkness grows too deep to see beyond. There is a saying among the Firecasts that courage is meaningless if you do not know what you are facing. For generations, the Tau faced only the challenges they could see and understand. Harsh worlds, rival tribes, and in time, the slow, measured expansion among the stars. The arrival of the Great Rift and the truths it revealed began to fracture this certainty. As the aftershocks of the Eye of Terror reached deeper into Tau space, the cracks did not appear first on the front lines, but within the hearts and minds of the Empire's most loyal servants. The Ethereals, so often the quiet architects of unity, found themselves beset by questions they had no answers for. In the chambers of Taun, where policy for entire star systems was debated, the calm deliberations turned sharp and brittle. What should be said to the citizens who demanded to know why worlds were suddenly being abandoned, why trade routes were being shifted, why entire fleets vanished into regions once marked safe? Some Ethereals argued for continued secrecy, believing the truth would do more harm than good. Better to preserve hope, even if it required gentle deception. Others insisted that the Tau must be prepared for a new reality, that only by facing the facts together could the greater good endure the coming storm. This schism rippled outward, touching every caste. The Firecaste, long used to fighting tangible enemies, struggled with a foe that could not be met in open battle. Some commanders, haunted by reports of unexplainable horrors at the galactic fringe, grew reckless, seeking glory or oblivion in hopeless engagements. Others became overcautious, refusing orders to advance into regions their ancestors had charted, suspecting every unexplained malfunction or comms blackout as the harbinger of something worse than death. Stories spread among the rank and file, of squads lost to madness, of battles where the enemy was never seen but only felt, as a creeping unease that froze even the bravest hearts. The Watercaste faced their own crisis. Trained to navigate diplomacy, economics, and cultural exchange, they now encountered alien envoys and human renegades whose eyes carried the weight of knowledge too heavy to bear. Some Tau diplomats, especially those who had traveled beyond the Empire's core, returned home changed, speaking less, dreaming of voids, their confidence in the future badly shaken. A handful even broke with tradition, publishing anonymous treatises warning that the Tau must not make the same mistakes as the Imperium. That faith in the greater good should not be a shield against hard truths, but the reason to confront them. For the Earth caste, the upheaval took on a different cast. Their identity, rooted in logic, engineering, and control, was deeply threatened by phenomena that made a mockery of all natural law. Research labs once dedicated to incremental progress suddenly redirected their efforts to desperate projects. Shielding devices to blunt the psychic aftershocks, sensor arrays capable of detecting warp anomalies, even theoretical studies of how the mind might be protected against horrors that defy reason. Some engineers, frustrated by repeated failures, began to whisper darkly about the folly of overreaching, recalling the fate of lost expeditions and the haunted silence that followed each disaster. Perhaps the most profound impact was felt among the Air caste, whose pilots and navigators lived their entire lives between worlds. Used to mapping safe passages and reading the language of the stars, they were among the first to realize that their knowledge was now obsolete. Old rotes buckled and vanished. Trusted corridors became death traps overnight. The sense of mastery that defined the aircast's pride was replaced by a humility bordering on fear. For the first time, Tau pilots compared their profession to the madness-plagued human navigators. No longer able to laugh at Imperial superstition, but forced to admit that the void hides terrors which no logic or censor can predict. Through all of this, the Tau population looked to the Ethereals for reassurance. Propaganda broadcasts emphasized unity, resilience, and the triumph of the greater good over adversity. But underneath the carefully controlled messaging, whispers grew. Some citizens demanded transparency, fearing that secrecy would only breed more uncertainty. Others called for isolation, suggesting that the Tau withdraw from expansion entirely until the nature of the Eye and the Great Rift could be understood. There were even fringe movements advocating for the pursuit of psychic research, a heresy in Tau terms, arguing that only by understanding the Imperium could the Empire hope to survive what was coming. Amid these mounting tensions, art and culture reflected the anxiety. No longer were the holoscreens filled only with stories of scientific marvels and heroism. New tales emerged, darker and stranger, of explorers who vanished, of outposts where the stars changed overnight, of voices in the night urging caution. The very language of the Tau began to shift, with new words invented to capture the creeping dread that had no name in their tradition. This was the true test of the greater good, not the wars against orcs, or the diplomatic maneuvering with the Imperium, but the internal reckoning with an evil that could not be bargained with or reasoned away. For the first time, the Tau saw themselves as others did. Not as Inevet across the sprawling, war-torn expanse of the galaxy, word of the T-Tau's odd insulation from the Eye of Terror spreads in ways as varied as the stars themselves. No race, not even those that despise the Tau or dismiss them as naive upstarts, is entirely indifferent to the anomaly they represent. To the Imperium, whose entire existence is defined by struggle against the warp's horrors, the Tau's history seems at once enviable and deeply suspicious. Imperial officials and inquisitors study Tau expansion patterns, whispering among themselves about the Xenos enigma, the riddle of why these aliens have never suffered the fates that have befallen so many human worlds. Some, driven by jealousy or paranoia, accuse the Tau of harboring hidden demonic pacts or of benefiting from the forgotten protections of the old ones. Others, perhaps more honest, find themselves quietly wishing that even a sliver of the Tau's peace could be granted to the worlds they govern. The Inquisition, that shadowy collective tasked with defending humanity from heresy and the warp, is especially fixated. Cells devoted to xenology pore over intercepted Tau communications, searching for signs of forbidden knowledge or secretive cults. Whenever an imperial world falls to chaos and the nightmare spills across the void, agents are quick to note the Tau's distance, always searching for a connection or a reason. Anything but the possibility that the Tau are simply spared by accident or design. For all their bluster about human superiority, many inquisitors secretly fear the opposite. That the Tau's apparent immunity is a sign of their own failure, that the ancient sins of mankind have doomed their species to a fate the Tau have thus far eluded. Among the Eldar, the Tau's avoidance of the Eye is regarded with both sorrow and a kind of bitter pride. To the ancient seers and farseers of the craft worlds, the Tau are a living echo of the past, a reminder of what the galaxy might have been if not for the fall of the Eldar and the birth of Slaanesh. Some among the Eldar believe that the Tau have inherited a measure of the innocence the Eldar once possessed, a shield forged not by will, but by circumstance. There are whispered debates among the Harlequins and the mystics of Ulthwé as to whether the Tau are the final hope of a galaxy sickened by psychic excess, or merely another tragic example waiting to be claimed by the ever-hungry gods. The Eldar rarely interfere, choosing instead to watch and wait, hoping the Tau might yet offer a lesson to the survivors of their ancient calamity. Orcs, for their part, regard the Tau's wariness of certain voids as evidence of weakness. To orcs, all space is a battlefield, every anomaly a new challenge, every warp storm an excuse for more Daka. They have no patience for the Tao's caution, no understanding of the deeper forces at play. But even among the greenskins, the Tao's pattern of avoidance becomes part of legend. There are orc warbosses who speak in half-joking awe of the blue gits who know where not to go, treating the forbidden sectors as potential sites for the biggest, wildest fights, precisely because the Taos steer clear. The Tyranids, those mindless devourers, feel nothing of the eye's horror. Yet even the hive mind, in its cold animal intelligence, seems to skirt the most dangerous warp-touched zones. Tau avoidance of these regions is mirrored by the Tyranid fleet movements, an unconscious echo of a deeper, more universal instinct for survival. In this, the Tiao are not unique but exemplary, life, in all its forms, recoiling from the wounds of reality. Yet it is among the galaxy's smaller powers, the merchant consortiums, rogue trader dynasties, and lesser xeno-civilizations, that the Tiao's path inspires the most speculation. Some see the Tiao as lucky, others as guided by hidden wisdom. Pirate lords refuse to operate near the sectors the Tiao avoid, convinced by rumor that the blue-skinned empire possesses forbidden technology or that their Ethereals can sense what no other race can. Mercenaries and traders sometimes attempt to ingratiate themselves with Tau explorers, hoping to learn the secret of safe navigation or to profit from information about safe corridors around the eye's periphery. This web of perception creates a curious effect. The Tiao, without ever realizing it, become both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. To some, their avoidance of the eye is a mark of cowardice, a refusal to face the galaxy's greatest trial. To others, it is the highest form of wisdom, a living rebuke to those who would mistake suffering for virtue. The Tiao themselves do not fully grasp the significance of this reputation. To them, the absence of the eye is simply a fact of their existence, a mystery they have only recently begun to contemplate. But in the collective imagination of the galaxy, the Tao's story grows larger than life. Their careful navigation is recounted in hushed voices by survivors on ruined worlds, admired by desperate imperial governors, and analyzed by ambitious Eldar prophets. Even those who scorn or hate the Tao cannot entirely deny the strange sense of possibility they represent. In a setting defined by tragedy, their very existence poses a challenge to the status quo, a proof that the future is not entirely written, that there are paths, however narrow, that do not end in damnation. As the Age of Darkness deepens and the Eye's influence continues to spread, the Tao's reputation may become both a shield and a target. Some will seek to destroy what they cannot understand, others will try to learn from it. Perhaps the greatest danger is that the Tao themselves, forced at last to confront the Eye, will lose what makes them unique, becoming simply one more embattled race in an endless cycle of war and sorrow. But until that day comes, their avoidance remains a mystery. A riddle, a warning, and a hope, all at once. Able victors, but as one fragile civilization in a galaxy that devours all hope. The pressure forged new resilience, but also new fractures. The old confidence that the future would always be brighter began to fade, replaced by a wary determination to endure whatever came next. Yet, even in the heart of uncertainty, there remained a spark of defiance. The Tao are not a people easily cowed. Their unity, tested as never before, adapted to new realities. Councils grew more open, sharing select truths to maintain trust. Engineers and scientists worked side by side with diplomats and warriors to craft a new doctrine for survival in the shadow of the Eye. The struggle was no longer about expansion, but about perseverance, about proving that the greater good could survive, not by denying the darkness, but by learning to live beside it, and if necessary, to fight it with everything they had. And so, as the galaxy turned and the Eye's shadow crept ever closer, the Tao endured. Scarred, changed, perhaps even a little wiser, but unbroken. Their greatest battle was not against any alien fleet, but against despair itself. And in that they remained, for now, a beacon of what is possible, even in a universe built on tragedy. If you've enjoyed exploring this strange, hopeful corner of the grimdark galaxy with me, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community for more deep dives into Warhammer lore, wild theories, and passionate discussion. The galaxy is vast, and every story brings new mysteries. Let's keep searching for them together. For the greater good, and for the love of lore.